So I've already done a breakdown for both the slaying of the suitors scene and the Circe sequence, but one of my favourite moments from Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey is the attack by the Laestrygonians. It's one of the main turning points in the journey home for Odysseus, acting as the moment where his men really start to question his leadership. So in this video essay, I'm going to be breaking down the Laestrygonian scene from Nolan's film, discussing a lot of the details within the full scene, how it compares to Homer's epic poem, and everything we know surrounding the filming process behind it. Before I get into it though, if you want to keep up to date on any of my future content surrounding the work of Christopher Nolan, then don't forget to support this upload by giving it a like rating, subscribing to the channel, and turning on your notifications. But without further ado, let's dive into the Laestrygonian scene from the Odyssey. So not long after escaping their encounter with the Cyclops, Odysseus and his crew make landfall near the domain of the Laestrygonians. In Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, this sequence becomes the point where Homer's mythic grandeur meets Nolan's grounded physical style of realism. The moment unfolds quietly at first, with Odysseus leading his men through a dense stretch of forest where they come across an armoured Laestrygonian child. But that is a child only in name, since they already stand as the size of a grown adult. Odysseus approaches with a request for hospitality, but then the child laughs at him. Eurylochus, who is far more stern and direct, then repeats the request. And instead of answering them, the child lets out a piercing scream and bolts back into the trees, leaving the crew unsettled and aware that something is deeply wrong. What follows is complete chaos as moments later, several towering, fully armed Laestrygonians emerge from the mist and cut down two of Odysseus's men with brutal efficiency. The Laestrygonians are portrayed as a fiercely territorial people, responding to Odysseus and his men's intrusion with cold precision. Their instinct is protection through overwhelming force, and they enforce the boundaries of their land with ruthless efficiency. In Nolan's interpretation, the Laestrygonians are equipped with surprisingly advanced armour, having silver or iron-worked helmets, breastplates, and articulated limb guards that give them a heavy, almost militaristic silhouette. Many of them wield iron swords in a range of sizes, with most of them having straight blades meant for chopping or thrusting. The largest Laestrygonian, implied to be inspired by King Antiphates, carries a massive curved weapon resembling a scimitar, emphasising his status and brutality. Others use long pole arms with crescent blades, which prove devastatingly effective at impaling Odysseus's men or hurling them into the trees. Once they start cutting through Odysseus's men, he immediately orders a retreat. The attack is coordinated from both sides, meaning that the only way the crew can go is back to the ships. And we also see that the giants use traps in the forest to slow their escape. Initially, Odysseus and a handful of his men try to stand their guard, but their blows barely register against the Laestrygonian armour and their massive weapons. Some of them are forced into a tightening corridor of shifting trees, where the Laestrygonians stab at them relentlessly. So the survivors of that attack break away and sprint towards their ships, with the giants still chasing after them. The end of this scene is then one of the most intense sequences in the entire film, as Nolan intercuts between wider aerial shots and Odysseus's perspective to show the scale of the Laestrygonians' attack on the coastline. And Odysseus and a handful of his men are able to reach their largest ship. Odysseus also kills a pursuing Laestrygonian with an arrow, just as it's about to strike down Eurylochus. But the two smaller vessels aren't as fortunate, as they fail to pull away in time and are violently tipped and smashed apart by the giants. The camera lingers on Odysseus as he witnesses all the destruction, showing horror, guilt, and a grim recognition of what's just happened. He escaped with only a fraction of his men, and the weight of that loss settles on him immediately. Now, Christopher Nolan's interpretation of this scene diverges quite a lot from Homer's original episode, not because he abandons the myth, but because he reshapes it to fit his grounded physical style of filmmaking. In the original myth, the Laestrygonians are described as giants of mountain-like size who inhabit the city of Telepylos, traditionally placed in Sardinia or sometimes Corsica, depending on the source. Nolan's version doesn't mention King Antiphates directly nor his family, though the armoured child who appears before the attack may be a subtle nod to Antiphates' daughter, the figure who in Homer's tale directs Odysseus' scouts towards her father's palace and inadvertently triggers the disaster. In the myth, the annihilation of Odysseus' fleet is a massacre at a distance. Upholstered on the cliffs of their horseshoe-shaped port, the Laestrygonians bombard the ships with huge blocks of stone, then harpoon the sailors like fish to eat them. But in the film, the scene is transformed into a moment of bloody hand-to-hand combat. While Homer's giants are fantastical, Nolan's appear as more believable and terrifying in a way that feels grounded rather than mythical. And that change comes in how the encounter actually begins. In Homer's poem, the sequence unfolds when Odysseus sends 3 scouts inland. They meet the king's daughter, and then she guides them to the palace of Antiphates. Antiphates immediately seizes one of the men and devours him on the spot, forcing the remaining scouts to sprint back to the ships. So Nolan removes this entire prelude and replaces it with a far stranger and more atmospheric introduction. It's a deliberate choice that aligns with Nolan's preference for visual storytelling. The change in location also allows Nolan to stage a moment of action more practically, relying on physical stunts and combat in the space of the forest. In the poem, Odysseus further loses 11 of his 12 ships, so Nolan has reduced the scale of that loss, destroying 2 of 3 ships. This isn't a softening of the tragedy in the scene, but a recalibration so that the film can capture this moment with realism, having every man or performer featured in the scene. The director lingers on the devastation of the scene more, and he gives Odysseus a moment to absorb all of the horror. The reflective pause at the end of the scene is Nolan trying to ground a moment of action in emotion, letting the consequences of the violence sit heavily on the main character. It ultimately transforms the Laestrygonian scene from a mythic episode into a more psychological turning point for Odysseus, and it's a point where his men really start to question his leadership. Coming now to the filming of this sequence, while all the tricks behind the scene haven't been revealed, some details available from interviews have given us a much better idea of the approaches they used to bring this moment to life in the film. Like a lot of moments in Nolan's new film, the Laestrygonian sequence shows him pushing his practical filmmaking to its limits while avoiding digital shortcuts. The Laestrygonian attack sequence was filmed primarily in the Colbin Forest, where Nolan relied on an array of inventive practical techniques to sell the creature's massive scale. There were forced perspective setups, wire work, and detailed physical models, all combined to create the illusion of towering giants without leaning on digital effects. Nolan's priority was to make the violence feel physical and immediate, a chaotic, brutal encounter that shakes the crew's faith in Odysseus as their leader and underscores just how unprepared they are for their journey home. Nolan has said in multiple interviews himself that they used a blend of forced perspective, specialized lenses, and carefully choreographed stunt work to create the illusion of scale. And the result is a scene that is able to feel both mythic and grounded in physical reality. Coming to the foundation of the tricks used, forced perspective is something that Nolan has used in his films before, but never at this scale. The director used 7-foot-tall stuntmen as the giants and sub-5-foot stunt doubles for the Greeks, including 4'6" performer Devon Dalton, creating an in-camera illusion of towering scale for the Laestrygonians. So in a lot of the shots featuring Matt Damon's Odysseus from behind or at a distance, you're actually watching a smaller stunt performer, making the 7-foot actors look even bigger in the shot. Cinematographer Hoyte van Hoytema also played a crucial role in setting this illusion as well. He used careful camera blocking and specialized focal lengths to make the smaller actors look smaller. An undersized stunt double stood closer to the camera or behind elements to sell the extreme height difference against the giants. It's this analog technique that allowed them to avoid digital green screen work and keep the physical interaction grounded in the real environments. It allowed them to film images that are more believable and ones that will hopefully last the test of time over ones that are produced digitally or overuse visual effects. Moving on, the action choreography is another area where Nolan's practical approach to this scene really shines. The choreography of the fight in the forest is staged as a deliberate homage to Ray Harryhausen. Nolan had openly acknowledged this influence, echoing the dynamic and rhythmically chaotic energy of Harryhausen's legendary skeleton fight from Jason and the Argonauts in 1963. The sequence channels that same blend of mythic menace and tightly choreographed movement, translating Harryhausen's stop-motion artistry into Nolan's grounded physical filmmaking. And another impressive technical achievement is the destruction of the ships towards the end of this scene. The mechanics behind making this moment work have not been talked about in interviews, but after watching the scene multiple times, I think that Nolan built partial ship hulls on gimbals, allowing them to tilt, collapse, and break apart in controlled ways. Shooting this from a distance or from Odysseus' perspective seemed like it was a real challenge for the crew, because you have to hide the filmmaking operations behind moving the ships and making it look like it is coming from the Laestrygonian giants themselves. The pacing of the editing does help with all of this though, because the sequence cuts between wide shots to show scale and then tighter shots that emphasize the brutality, creating a rhythm that feels chaotic but also controlled. For instance, the forced perspective illusions are never held on screen for too long, and Nolan shows them just enough for the audience to register the size difference, then moves on before the eye can question the trick. It's the same philosophy he used in the action of Dunkirk, where practical effects that are shown quickly feel more real than digital effects shown over longer takes. So taken together, these techniques make the Laestrygonian sequence one of the most technically impressive scenes in the Odyssey, and perhaps even Nolan's career. It's a fusion of ancient myth and modern craftsmanship, a moment where the impossible feels real because every frame is built from physical elements carefully arranged to deceive the eye. Nolan reimagines the Laestrygonians through the lens of practical filmmaking, proving once again that scale and spectacle don't require digital shortcuts when you understand how to manipulate space and perspective. But that was my video discussing the Laestrygonian scene from Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. What do you think towards how the director adapted this scene, and is it one of your favourite moments from Nolan's latest movie? Let me know down below in the comments section. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've been Cortex, and as always, make some noise.